like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was agnostic. He just basically was like pulling from all different practices to see what worked, right? And that's what I'm trying to do. Because
Bruce Lee is the shit, by the way. Yeah. Bruce Lee was the shit. Oh, he's great. I love him.
Well, have you seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I love that scene, bro. That's one of my favorite movies. Think what you want about Hollywood. Degenerate pedophile Satanist, great. But that's a fantastic movie.
Yeah, it's so good, man. So good.
And my buddy and I were watching that one. I'd seen it already. I loved it so much. I went to show my friend that. And yeah, the Bruce Lee scene, I can totally see that too, by the way. Like, I can see that. And actually, for those who don't know, that was actually based on a real life story. It was kind of loosely based on a story of Jean LaBelle, Judo Jean LaBelle, who's a badass BAMF, right? And he basically is like, who's this little Asian kid? But at the end of the day, the part of this that the movie doesn't say is that after they had that altercation, they actually trained together. Bruce Lee's like, hey, I can learn a lot from you. And Judo. And Jean LaBelle's like, I can learn from you. And then they did that. They collabed. So yeah, they may have had a little bit of you know, chest bumping contest, but at the end of the day, they recognized where the holes were in their own game. And they're like, I can learn from you because you're great, and I'm gonna take that. So that's I thought that was a great story.
Yeah, for sure. And just on Bruce Lee, there's like these lately. There's been a lot of like anti-Bruce Lee sentiment. You know, people pointing out he probably wasn't as badass as people thought he was, and he didn't fight as much publicly. He was a genius marketer, you know. Bruce Lee was a genius marketer, and don't get me wrong, the dude, you know, was a badass, and he did a lot of amazing stuff. But he also like built his own hype. Like the dude came from China and became wildly known and successful in America. You know, you gotta kind of hype, you know, embellish, build the legend a little bit. So yeah, I got mad respect for Bruce Lee. But man, ultimately, like no matter how good of a fighter you are, like if you're $120, like some dude gets a grab on you, he's gonna whip you into a Rolls Royce. You know?
I would talk to old martial artists, and martial artists are the worst for this. Well, maybe not nowadays, since like so many decades of 1993, I think was the first UFC, and that's the great thing about Jeet Kune Do as well, is that it was kind of like the origin of mixed martial arts. It was like kind of like the first mixed martial art. Well, don't argue that pankration was the first mixed martial art, but let's just skip over that for a second. Yeah, it's basically so I'd ask a lot of old martial artists, and again, I train in Krav Maga, and there's a lot of karate students. You'd have kung fu students and Jeet Kune Do students, and you'd ask that rhetorical question like, okay, Bruce Lee in his prime versus Mike Tyson in his prime. And people would be like, oh, Bruce Lee, because he's Bruce Lee and size doesn't matter. And it's like, no, that's bullshit. Have you ever been in a fight? Have you ever been in a fight? Tyson
all day.
Tyson will beat Bruce Lee. Tyson will beat Jake Paul. Tyson will beat anybody at any age, even in their prime. Like that guy's an absolute savage. And I can't wait to see the fight. It might be a clown show, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I did boxing for like 3 years, like trained in boxing. And yeah, like people don't realize the difference that weight makes. You know, like I put on a bunch of weight and also strength, and like, yeah, I would get gassed in a fight, but even still, like a guy who's $140, he can only do so much damage to you, like in terms of physics. And you get a hold of that guy, like, and even still, like most guys can knock out most other guys with one punch. Like if you get a good punch to a guy's jaw, you'll drop, right? So yeah, it's interesting. But I think UFC was the first time when, like, because all guys have an ego, right? And all these, you know, there's even the more esoteric, what do you call it? Martial arts, where even I think the senseis believe that they had like mystical powers to like with their minds, you know. So that I love watching those videos of
the no touch knockouts.
Yeah.
George Dillman, and he's a famous one. There's like no touch knockouts, and when it like he did some demonstration for some like inside edition or some crap like that, and he couldn't knock it. The guy it wasn't working, and he goes, well, you know, it's the energy flowing through. It's again going to this like energy and vibes and frequency shit. And he's like, I shouldn't call it shit, but in this case, tongue pressed in my mouth the wrong way. That interrupts the energy flow and it won't work. So I'm like, Okay, great. So, you know, I need something that my life depends on, but God help me if I fucking lift my toe the wrong way.
Yeah. It's like, yeah, one of them, like the sensei got his ass kicked by some just like, you know, third year UFC MMA guy, right?
Yeah.
And just, yeah, it's almost embarrassing because you see this, you know, like 10th degree black belt, you know, guy's been a sensei forever, just getting the shit kicked by some teenager, right? And he's like, well, it's, you know, it's because you didn't believe in my powers. It's like,
The volume off on this? Yes, I do. Okay, good. Just going in here into the Rumble chat just to see if I get any Rumble rants. I got one of the podcasts and I wasn't on Rumble, and so I missed it. And so someone paid to have their question read, and I didn't read it. But yeah, the first UFC was actually still style versus style, right? And it was, you had those people that thought they were the shit come in and, you know, meet somebody else, and they found out quickly style versus style, what kind of style was superior. And of course, for those first few, it was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Then people started cross-training, which was what Bruce Lee advocated, right? It was cross-training. And now you have a mixed martial artist. They do their boxing, they do their Greco-Roman wrestling, they do their whatever it is that they do, and they put it together to be kind of a complete package. And what's funny now is you kind of go full circle, where you have now guys that are like Stephen Thompson, the Wonder Kid Thompson, Lyoto Machida is another one. You have guys like this that are karatekas, the karate guys, and they're using their weird kind of karate movements in UFC. And since I've been training for a Muay Thai wrestling boxing guy, they're not used to it. And so it takes another adjustment to get used to that. So it's a sport that is at a high level, but it's always evolving. And it's so fascinating to me.
Yeah, no, for sure. But I just loved how it like cut out 90% of the bullshit, which is fighting. Right?
Yes.
Because it's called, most of life is just dudes posturing, you know, and making their little, what do they call it, closet kings or secret kings, right? Everyone thinks they're a secret king, and UFC.
My sensei could be your sensei's ass.
Yeah, right. Exactly, right. Like, yeah, BJJ changed the world of fighting, in my opinion, because you have a guy who's a $130 who can just submit you all the time. But then, you know, if you lay a beating on a guy who's a $130, like I had my friend, he was a purple belt in BJJ, and he was training us, and like we were in our boxing gym, and he submitted me like 9 times. This guy was 130 pounds, right? Then finally I grabbed him. I threw him like 15 feet around the room, you know. So like if I was able to lay a beating on him, you would have been done. But yeah, I think really it's Muay Thai, BJJ. Those are like, if you get proficient at both of those, you're deadly. In my opinion.